Have you ever wondered why the man who promises you the world often retreats the moment you offer him your heart? Why does a certain kind of intensity in his pursuit seem to vanish, replaced by a cool, unnerving distance, precisely when you allow your own walls to fall? This is not a simple game of push and pull, nor is it a flaw in your capacity to love. This, instead, is the silent, unconscious choreography of a psyche grappling with its own deepest wounds and most forbidden longings. It is a dance directed not by the conscious man, but by the shadowy figures that live within him, figures that Carl Jung would recognize instantly. To understand this man, one must first venture into the landscape of his inner world, a realm divided between the persona he presents and the shadow he conceals. On the surface, he may embody the archetype of the lover, the hero, the provider. He speaks of connection, of future plans, of a deep and abiding intimacy. He is, in the light of day, everything one might desire. But in the shaded, private theater of his unconscious, another archetype pulls the strings, the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. This is not a chronological age, but a psychological one, a refusal of the burdens of mature, integrated love. The pure craves the intoxication of the chase, the sublime high of potential, because potential is flawless and demands nothing of his actual, flawed self. He is in love with the Anima, his own internal idealized feminine, which he projects onto a woman. And you, in the beginning, are the perfect screen for this magnificent projection. He does not fall for you in your beautiful, messy human entirety. He falls for the goddess he has painted in your image. He worships at the altar of his own creation. Your realness, your needs, your vulnerabilities, your glorious and necessary imperfections becomes a crack in that divine image. It is a reminder of the very human demands he is psychologically unequipped to meet. His craving for a detached woman is, therefore, a craving for a woman who can maintain the projection. A woman who remains slightly out of focus, just beyond his grasp, allows the goddess to remain intact. She does not ask him to tend to the mundane garden of a real relationship. She allows him to remain a pilgrim forever gazing at a distant, shimmering temple. This is where your own psychology becomes the crucial mirror. His flight triggers something ancient within you, a dormant pattern waiting to be activated. It hooks the part of you that believes love must be earned, that your worth is a prize to be won by cracking his code. You may find yourself bending, shape-shifting, making yourself smaller, quieter, less needy, all in a desperate, unconscious attempt to re-become the distant goddess he first pursued. You are trying to heal the abandonment wound by becoming the very object of abandonment. This is a sacred, if painful, invitation. His detachment is not a commentary on your worth, but a stark, unblinking spotlight on where you have outsourced it. The Stoics knew this truth millennia ago. You have power over your own mind, but not over events outside of it. To try to control his attraction, his presence, his commitment, is to surrender your inner citadel to a force you can never command. And so the dance deepens, not on the ballroom floor of conscious romance, but in the subterranean caverns of the unconscious. The man who craves the detached woman is not merely avoiding intimacy, he is fleeing from the terrifying specter of his own integrated self. His pursuit is a form of holy war against the parts of his own soul he has exiled into darkness, his vulnerability, his need for nurturance, what he perceives as his weakness. These disowned fragments coalesce into what Jung termed the shadow, and it is this shadow that dictates the rhythm of his attraction. When he encounters a woman who is whole, who possesses the very emotional depth he has cast out of himself, he is not met with a partner, but with a mirror reflecting his own internal void. The warmth of her genuine presence does not comfort him. It threatens to illuminate the cold, barren chambers he has spent a lifetime barricading. This is the forbidden psychology, his soul's paradoxical hunger for the very wholeness it actively repels. He is drawn to the light, but his eyes, accustomed to the dim twilight of projection, can only perceive it as a blinding, consuming fire. The detached woman, by her very emotional unavailability, provides a safe harbor. She is a blank canvas upon which his anima can play without the terrifying demand for mutual, raw exposure. In her coolness, he finds a perverse permission to remain fragmented. There is no call to descend into his own depths, to engage in the nigredo, the blackening, the first stage of alchemical transformation where base material is broken down. He mistakes the quiet for peace and the emptiness for freedom, not realizing he has chosen a gilded cage over the wild, untamed, and fertile landscape of true connection. You, in your earnestness to heal, to connect, to love fully, become the unwitting agent of this psychic confrontation. Your capacity for depth is not a flaw, it is a testament to your own journey toward individuation. But to the pure-led man, it is a demand he cannot comprehend. He will interpret your healthy boundaries as coldness, your emotional openness as a trap, and your consistent presence as a chain. He is a sailor who mistakes the calm, deep ocean for a swamp, desperately rowing back toward the familiar, rocky shores of ambiguity and longing. This is his aporia, a pathless path, a state of impassable perplexity. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote of the importance of standing firm, not being flooded by the flesh. This man is perpetually flooded, not by the flesh, but by the unintegrated psyche, a tempest of unconscious fears that masquerade as logical reasoning for his withdrawal. Your task here is not to decipher his map, for it leads only in circles. Your task is to recognize that his retreat is a form of sacred data, a direct transmission from his inner world telling you everything you need to know. The pain of his distancing is not a signal to pursue, but a call to anchor yourself so profoundly in your own worth that his comings and goings become as significant as the weather, noticed, perhaps, but never allowed to dictate your inner climate. This is where you begin to reclaim your projections. You have likely projected the archetype of a king, the integrated masculine, onto him, hoping he will be the solid ground upon which you can stand. His inability to hold that projection is the beginning of your liberation. It forces you to become your own sovereign, to cultivate that unshakable ground within your own soul. The moment you cease your pursuit, a profound and unsettling silence descends. This silence is not an emptiness, but a fertile void. It is the temenos, the sacred precinct where your own transformation is waiting to be born. In the absence of his distracting energy, the psychic hooks he embedded in your own unconscious wounds begin to throb with a familiar ache. This ache is the call to your own shadow work. For the pattern of attracting such men is never an accident. It is a deeply intelligent, if painful, curriculum designed by the soul to lead you back to the parts of yourself you have abandoned. You were not merely loving a man. You were engaging in a desperate dialogue with your own disowned self-worth, trying to find it reflected in his elusive eyes. Consider the archetype you may have been embodying in this dance, the Puella, the eternal girl, whose sense of identity and value is contingent upon being chosen, being seen, being validated by the masculine other. Her world is one of potential, a fantasy, of waiting for her life to begin when the prince arrives. But the pure man is not a prince. He is a fellow wanderer in the same unconscious landscape, and his arrival signals not the beginning of your story, but the intensification of your own inner conflict. The detachment you exhibit to try and win him back is a hollow mimicry of the empowered feminine. True detachment, the Stoic apatheia, is not a cold withdrawal of affection. It is a state of freedom from compulsive passion, an inner sovereignty that remains unshaken because its source of validation is internal, rooted in self-knowledge and virtue. This is the alchemical fire. As you sit in the stillness, refusing to reach for the temporary anesthetic of his attention, you are forced to face the raw material of your own being. The grief, the rage, the ancient question of "am I enough?" rise to the surface. Do not flee from them. These are not enemies to be vanquished, but orphaned parts of your own psyche, your inner children, your wounded femininity, begging to be reclaimed. This is the process of enantiodromia, Jung's concept of the emergence of the unconscious opposite. The extreme outward focus on an unavailable man inevitably swings you toward the necessity of an intense, inward focus. Your longing for him transforms, through the heat of conscious suffering, into a longing for your own wholeness. You begin to see that his inability to see you is a perfect mirror of your own inability to fully see and accept yourself. You were asking a ghost to confirm your solidity. The work now is to become the embodied, substantial woman who no longer requires such confirmation. It is to nurture the parts of you that felt they had to earn love, to hold the young one who learned to associate anxiety with care, to reassure the protector that it is safe to lower the drawbridge when the right, integrated energy approaches, not before. This is not about building higher walls, but about cultivating an unassailable inner sanctuary. It is about shifting the entire paradigm from, "How can I make him want me?" to the far more potent and terrifying question, "What within me is so magnificent that it can no longer tolerate crumbs from a feast it is destined to host?" This magnificent inner structure, once a nebulous concept, now begins to form with the weight and density of granite. It is the foundation of what the ancients called arete, excellence of character, virtue in action. This is not the brittle perfection of the persona, but the resilient, weathered strength that comes from having consciously met your own darkness and chosen integrity anyway. You stop asking why he pulls away and start commanding, with the quiet authority of a queen, what you will allow to remain in your sphere. This is the activation of the inner sovereign, the archetype that governs order, boundaries, and self-respect. She does not beg for loyalty, she inspires it by her very presence. She does not chase. Her kingdom is so rich and complete that others are granted the privilege of visitation, not the power to determine its climate. The man who craves detachment operates within a specific economy of desire, one where value is artificially inflated by scarcity and ambiguity. By removing yourself from this economy, you cause a seismic shift. You are no longer a currency to be traded on his terms. You become a sovereign nation with your own laws, your own resources, your own unassailable borders. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes a practical shield. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them. The view you now take is that his behavior is not a measure of your worth, but a definitive statement of his current capacity. To grieve for his absence is human. To contort your soul to lure him back is a betrayal of your own nascent sovereignty. This reclamation echoes the Jungian process of individuation, the journey toward becoming the person you were always meant to be, distinct from the collective pressures and unconscious patterns. The detached man was a crucial, if painful, catalyst on this path. His reflection showed you where you were fragmented, where you sought completion in an external other. Your healing occurs the moment you realize that the wholeness you sought in his elusive promise was always waiting within the depths of your own being, in the reconciliation of your conscious self with your neglected shadow. The passionate, loving woman and the clear, boundaried queen are not opposites. They are complementary forces that, when integrated, create a love that is both tender and formidable. This internal shift has a mysterious, almost gravitational effect on the outer world. The anxious chase, the frantic deciphering of texts, the constant monitoring of your own behavior, all of it falls away, leaving a profound and magnetic stillness. You are no longer emitting signals of neediness, which repels the integrated and attracts the predatory. You begin to emit a signal of completion. This does not guarantee that the detached man will return, transformed. In fact, it often ensures he will flee permanently, for your energy becomes incompatible with his unresolved state. But it does something far more important. It begins to draw connections that resonate at this new, higher frequency. It announces to the world, and to your own soul, that the season of begging for entry to a walled garden is over because you have become the gardener of your own vast and fertile estate. The final, and most sacred, stage of this initiation is not about him at all. It is the quiet, resolute dawn of a love that asks for nothing in return. This is the love that flows from the core of your individuated self, a love that is not a transaction but an overflow. It is the conscious embrace of your own animus, not the hostile, argumentative inner critic, but the positive, logos-driven force that provides inner structure, discernment, and the ability to act in accordance with your own truth. This integrated masculine within you now stands guard, not as a jailer keeping love out, but as a sacred protector ensuring that only what is resonant with your soul's integrity may enter. He is the bridge between your deep, feminine feeling and your powerful, purposeful action in the world. In this space, the entire dynamic of craving and detachment is alchemized. You understand that his craving was a misplaced spiritual hunger, a thirst for the divine feminine that he sought in a human woman, without the requisite sacrifice of his own ego. And your own craving for his presence was a mirrored spiritual hunger, a thirst for the divine masculine that you, too, sought outside of yourself. The healing arrives when you realize you are both the chalice and the wine. You can hold your own depth, you can honor your own longing, and you can provide for yourself the steadfast, loyal, and present love you once begged for from a ghost. This is the essence of emotional freedom, the realization that no one outside of you can ever give you what you are unwilling to cultivate within your own being. The pain of his withdrawal thus becomes a sacred wound, a reminder not of your lack, but of your wholeness trying to break through. You stop perceiving the past as a series of mistakes and begin to see it as a perfectly orchestrated curriculum. Every moment of confusion, every tear shed in the lonely hours, was a necessary lesson in the architecture of your own soul. The Stoic sage Seneca wrote that difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. Your mind, your emotional resilience, has been strengthened through this labor. You can now observe a man's detachment not as a trigger for anxiety, but as data. It is information about his journey, his capacity, his unresolved shadows, information that allows you to choose, with clear-eyed wisdom, whether his path has any meaningful intersection with your own. You arrive, then, at a state of profound inner peace. It is not the peace of avoidance, but the peace that comes from having navigated the storm and learned to trust your own seamanship. The chaotic tides of another's unconsciousness can no longer capsize your vessel, for you have become the calm, deep center of the ocean itself. You relate from a place of abundance, not deficit. You no longer seek a man to complete you, but to complement you. You are no longer a supplicant at the altar of a distant god, but a goddess in your own right, capable of recognizing and worthy of receiving, a love that is offered freely, consistently, and without the exhausting drama of pursuit and flight. This is your rebirth. This is the moment you reclaim not just your power, but your very soul. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.